Okay, here we are again, and this time this went very well. So, um, this is unannounced, and I did it first of all because the last time it went very badly. This time it went very easily. I don't know what makes the difference, right? Okay, so there are so many things going on right now. If anybody has questions, you are so welcome to just type them in there and we can talk about anything animals. Keep it, respectful and all that kind of stuff for everybody's sake. But other than that, we're good to go. So here's something that has been on my mind with animals lately, and that is how we teach them and whether or not we should call it training. And one of the things that people have said about watching me train is it doesn't look like training. And yet, do you see learning happening? Do you see the behavior changing? And really, it happens so quickly. So I just came out of a class and there were 3 dogs working online in the class. And 2 of those dogs needed to learn to be quiet while their owner did something. And both the dogs are high energy and very expressive. They're just full of life. They're youngsters and they're good dogs. But we started and we went from a second of quiet to, we went from an instant of quiet to a second of quiet to, in one case, 2 seconds of quiet. Now, if you don't think that's a long time, if you have a dog that barks a lot, just time how many barks he gets in per second. So these dogs were doing great. They really did well. And virtually no errors. So let's talk about why it happens with no errors. And the first thing is we actually explain to the dogs what it is we want them to do. So you think about most of the training you see. How do they explain what they want to the dogs? Does the dog clearly understand what he's being asked to do before he starts to do it? Or is he put into a situation where he gets a correction if he doesn't do it perfectly? Is he put into a situation for an indefinite amount of time? Or is he put into a situation for a specific amount of time? If it's an indefinite amount of time, the uncertainty can make it harder for the animal. So by making sure that we take the opportunity to explain things to the dog, we can make things go much better and much faster. So here are some examples of explaining things to the dogs ahead of time. Are you going to put something on a dog? A leash, a collar, a halter, a jacket, a sweater, booties? If you're going to do any of those things, have you already let the dog get to know the thing that you're going to use? If you're going to put a jacket on the dog, does he already know about that jacket? Does he know what it smells like, what it feels like, where it's going to go on him, how it's going to be fastened? So let's say with marine mammals, you're going to teach them to wear a halter. Well, I would take strips of tubular nylon webbing and I would sew Velcro on the ends so that I could overlap that. And if the animal got frightened by something, he wouldn't swim away with a halter halfway on him. He'd swim away with nothing because I'd hold on to the Velcro and he'd break out. That's on purpose, right? That's why I did it that way. So he got a chance to learn about the Velcro before he put it on. They need to understand about the buckles, the snaps, the Velcro, any sounds that it makes. My horse was horrified in the wintertime when she had a conventional collar on, those cold pieces of metal right on her teeth in the wintertime. She recoiled from that. So when I saw that, I showed her what it was, but she knew. So then I went to a friend who crocheted and had her crochet over the tops of them all. And then I went back again and showed my horse how I changed it. And that totally got rid of any problems with putting that halter on her. Thank you again, Diane, all these years ago. It's been 20 years now. Okay, so what about aspects of getting the halter on? Does the animal understand about push versus pull? Versus, so you've got push, pull. What about give? Because you need the animal to give at certain times, right? To allow you to pull something tighter for a moment. How about constriction? Constriction is a really important thing for the animal to understand about, because otherwise, if you put something on the animal's neck or face and all of a sudden it's constricting, of course the animal's going to freak out. I would freak out. Even with some training, I might still freak out. Like maybe I could do it for a little bit, but maybe I'm not ready to sign on to do it all day long. Okay, so teaching the concept before we expect the concept to be put into action is really important. I'm thinking as I'm talking, but when we go to teach animals, that's a little different than training, because training implies that there's an actual response that you're going to get. And teaching implies that you impart knowledge. And I still call the training I do teaching because it mostly is teaching. Once the animal understands, they almost always will just do that. Although later on, there will be time that I need to proof behaviors. Proofing behaviors means that you communicate to the animal that these behaviors need to be done in different contexts, and some of them are going to be required. So I don't require very much from an animal. For me, they need to wait, stop, leave it, and drop it. And almost everything else is voluntary. And you might have different rules. If you're teaching service animals, you might need them to really be resolute in certain things, like bringing someone their phone or bringing someone their medication. And you might need that dog to really problem solve if it's difficult to do that. Similarly, when I taught monkeys to be aids to quadriplegics, there were some surprising things that they had to learn to deal with. So one was the steering mechanism on the wheelchair. The wheelchair that this one monkey worked with had a little stick, like a joystick, And the person that had the handicap had a form of muscular dystrophy and would, have to just kind of hit that stick. And it was very sensitive. Well, the monkeys had to learn no matter what, you don't touch the stick. And that includes accidentally with your tail while you're jumping up the shoulder. So, no matter which shoulder the monkey was going to sit on, the right or the left, they would have to come up the left shoulder, and the steering mechanism was also on the left. So when we did the proofing, we taught them and tested them on their ability to not touch that joystick no matter what the situation. And that included if it had jelly or honey on it, because the monkeys really liked sweet stuff, or cigarette stubs. This was back in the late 70s, and there were lots of cigarette stubs on the street. And it turns out that monkeys were very attracted to those. And they had to learn not to touch them anyway for all kinds of reasons. Disease from the poisons in the filters, but also disease from people's mouths and so on being on those cigarettes. So they really had to learn never to touch cigarette butts, but they were very, very attracted to it. So it turned out to be a really good thing to test their ability to resolutely not touch the joystick. So similarly, you're going to get, when you get into real training, you've got the situation that the animal learns in, and then you've got the situations that they need to perform in. And you have to build that context. So you start out, with the environment that you're doing the teaching in, and you keep expanding it until eventually you've built up their training so that they can deal with an environment even more difficult and more demanding than the one that you need them to work in. So those are just some of the considerations when you're training. So I like to keep the sessions short so that the animals can focus on one concept. We start out with an easy environment when we can, and then we will systematically make that environment more and more complex as it is in real life. And we will have sliding requirements. Like for most of my animals' lives, they just need to do those 4 things I said: wait, stop, leave it, drop it. So if an animal, let's say I want him to be with me, but he ran over there, I don't want to call him back, because sometimes the environment is too complex. And I don't want a dog running in front of a car or something like that. So instead, I tell him, stop and wait, and I will go get him. And similarly, the reason I have those particular requirements and not additional ones is because in the work I've done, the priority was long, healthy, happy, safe lives for these animals. So I was working with exotic animals, and they are very susceptible to stress. And stress is the great killer of all of us. I was listening to Dr. Robert Sapolsky's lecture on why zebras don't get ulcers. And it's fantastic. I really recommend it. But he's talking about the fact that all of a sudden we're all dying of these diseases that, are like diabetes, heart failure, all this kind of stuff. And we feel terrible about it. But then he talks about how it is in most of the world. and he said, how are your parasites? You have terrible parasite? No, that's not a problem for you? Okay. Do you have dysentery? No, you don't. All right. Are you starving? No. And the fact that these are the things that mostly kill other living beings. They starve to death, or they get eaten by somebody, or they get diseased from contaminated water and die within 3 days because there is no treatment for an animal in the wild. And we have health care, and we've been so good at expanding our ability to live that, gee, we live into our 70s, 80s, and we start to die of these diseases that didn't even exist 100 years ago because people just weren't even living that long. So really interesting thing. But of the diseases of old age, stress is a huge element of creating those problems. So same thing for zoo animals. Teaching animals to cope with stress and manage their emotions is the top priority in a training program. Okay. So let me just encapsulate what I've covered tonight. I like to do teaching where I explain to the animal what is happening and why I'm asking him to do something. I like to teach one idea at a time and then let the animal think about it, because we know from research that the animal will replay the neural connections, the neural activations that occurred during the learning phase, but actually backwards. So the animals are thinking about what they just did and kind of reliving that thing. I like to make sure that I cover those elements of the training that might be a little bit scary or worrisome. And we do it one item at a time and give the animal time to get to know what we're talking about and process that. Then we're going to go through the proofing process where we build up into more and more complex environments. And then we're going to start over again with another little training element. We're going to take all those training elements, and it's kind of like having a pantry full of great ingredients. When it's time to make dinner, you just go to the pantry and select what you need to make the dinner you want to serve. And similarly, when an animal learns all these concepts and understands how things work, he can put them together in infinite ways. And this is a really great way to train. It's a great way for the animal to learn. It's not arbitrary and rote. And boy, if you do training for movie work or advertisement work or theater work, it will pay off in spades, because a lot of times a director will be very specific on what he wants and then change his mind. And so if you originally had time to train, you don't now. And there's a lot of pressure because it's expensive. So when you train so that the animal understands what each of these things are and they have names, and then somebody wants to change something all of a sudden, it's easy. It's like saying, oh, we were going to have a salad with strawberries and pecans and cheese in it, and the strawberries have mold. So let's have blueberries, and let's have this other cheese, which goes with blueberries better. But everything else will be the same. You ready? Let's go. And that's all it takes. It doesn't take you 2 more weeks to create a different salad, because the animal understands all of the different ingredients. And it's okay if you need to change one of those ingredients, as long as you effectively communicate that. As you all know, the payoff for me has been the zoo animals and my own animals have lived great long lives. Yay. And so I'm really happy. And I worked for years in shows. There's a lot of pressure in shows. And the animals get tired if they do lots of shows together. And they've got lots of, like brothers, they'll punch each other at the wrong time and so on. And it's not that they don't like each other or anything else. They're just like brothers. They're just doing things. But when I quit doing shows, which I did up to 14 a day, when I quit doing shows, I decided I didn't want to train animals unless they wanted to do it as much as I did. And fortunately, they do. They really enjoy the challenges and the things we do together. And some of the stuff, they just enjoy what we do. Sarah loves to dance. She loves music. And it's been a big disappointment to her, I believe, that she's gotten arthritis and it made it harder for her to do that. But in any case, now we're back on the arthritis and we found some things that seem to really be helping. And she is nickering when we're doing the dancing. Is it beautiful? Well, I'll let you be the judge. Maybe not. But here's the thing. Every step that we reclaim is a victory for both of us. Because I used to be a lot better at this also. I was a dance major and Sarah was a natural dancer. And I also was somewhat of a musician. I played the violin. And my movement has not been anywhere near so musical lately. But we're not giving up. We're taking it on. And I just started a series of videos with Sarah to track her progress. And a shout out to my friend Kayce Roger, who's been helping Sarah with a number of different health aspects. And also Dr. Kathy Lombardi, who has also given Sarah some excellent treatments. And my friend Patty Menzel, who checks in with Sarah on a regular basis and lets me know if she gets any news from Sarah that I haven't gotten yet. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you're having an excellent time with your animals. And stay tuned. I hope to see you in another live stream.